This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk for another week. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you, and a happy Halloween to everyone. Yeah, I know we're getting some heat. There was no large plan to dress up today for the program, but that's because there was so much going on in the world of sports on the weekend. Busy week for the Winnipeg Jets as they somehow managed to get 5 of 6 points on this road trip. We'll talk about it coming up. And of course, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers finishing off the season on a winning note, a franchise record 15th win of the season. And now they sit back, wait to see what happens in the West Semi, and prepare for the 13th of November and the West Final at IG Field. Huge weekend in the National Football League as well, with the Monday Nighter coming up tonight in the Battle of Ohio. Lots of orange and black on tonight's Halloween broadcast with the Browns and Bengals playing. We'll get to that as well. And it should be fun. Of course, many of the Winnipeg Jet fans were down in Vegas on the weekend. Our good friend Jeff Hamilton also there. He'll join us from Vegas to pick apart last night's 2-1 OT loss for the Winnipeg Jets as the team comes back, day off today, and gets ready for a little bit of practice and preparation for a 3-game homestand beginning on Thursday with the Montreal Canadiens. Dave Poulin, TSN's hockey panel, will jump on first. We'll get his thoughts on the Jets so far at this point. How should they feel about this road trip, looking ahead to the homestand, as well as Dave's going to be here doing the Jets-Habs game, and knows quite a bit about the visitors later on this week. He'll tell us how Montreal looks, and I'll ask him about Johnny Kovacevic and how he is doing as well with the Montreal Canadiens. Welcome to everybody with us here watching live on YouTube. If you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button and do us a favor, hit the thumbs up as well to help us spread the channel. And a big welcome to everyone listening on podcast. Hope you had a great weekend. And I got to give a big shout out and thank you to the sponsors that make the show happen each and every day, including Princess Auto, CoolBet, Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Canadian Club Whiskey, Culligan Water, Wallace & Wallace, Consolidated Supply, Vita Health Fresh Market, F Apparel, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Royal Sports, and our friends at Boston Pizza. Great spot to go tonight if you don't want to be giving out candy and you want to be enjoying pizza, flights, and beers in the game tonight. Let's get to it. Michael Remis joins us one final time this week before a few days off. Remo, what's up? How was your weekend? Did you manage to take in all the sports? Or were you busy with other things?
No, what do you mean? I'm still tired from staying up super late watching Kenny and Rennie after Thursday and Friday's Jets games. I wasn't going to miss the historic opening night at Mullett Arena on Friday. That was awesome. Saturday, yeah, a bit slower. Maybe he's wrapping up the CFL regular season, but Sunday NFL all day leading into the Jets game. And I have to say, I mean, 5 out of 6 points on the road trip, tied for first in the Central. I got to be pretty pumped if you're a fan of the Jets right now, right, Huss? And nothing but excitement and positivity.
Well, I mean, I sure prefer these conversations, talking about how much better the team can play despite the positive results, than having a conversation saying, man, they played great, but they couldn't score it or they couldn't get it done again. This was far from well, first off, let's just Connor Hellebuck appreciation tweet right now. Everyone, wherever you are, clap, bow down, do what you got to do. The best player on the Winnipeg Jets continues to play at his best and has been stealing points for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, we talked on Friday night, the performance in LA, that's not going to cut it most nights in the National Hockey League. But when you have a goalie on the other side of the rink that's struggling and a guy that keeps you in the game, well, sometimes you'll squeeze out, 2 points. That's exactly what they did. The game on Friday night, didn't love the first period. Second and third periods, though, the Jets were clearly the dominant team, and they did deserve 2 points in that game, and they ended up getting it on a pretty fun overtime winner from Dubois over to former captain Blake Wheeler. Last night's game, though, Reem, and listen, we talked about this beforehand. If there was a bigger scheduled loss on the 82-game sked than tomorrow night, I doubt where it is. Winners of back-to-back games, a day off in Las Vegas on Halloween weekend on a Saturday night, and then a 5:00 start the next day. That's a recipe for disaster. And the only guy that prevented it from being a bit of a disaster was Connor Hellebuyck. I got a text from Gary after the game, who of course was there doing the broadcast, and he just basically said what everyone else had said. Connor Hellebuyck is on a mission right now, was in an absolute zone. He deserved better last night than, only getting 1 point out of it. But listen, they're the Jets as a team, I think, and we heard it from Brendan Dillon after the fact as well. I mean, they were not proud of the way that they played. Connor Hellebuyck was the guy that got it done. But I mean, it's a long season. You're not going to be at your best. And when you are far from your best and you can pull out a couple points, I mean, there certainly is something to be happy about for Winnipeg Jet fans. That being said, Reem, they're going to need to be a hell of a lot better, even against Montreal and Chicago, teams that are thought of as maybe on the lesser half of the National Hockey League hierarchy right now, if they want to get points right now, because that was the Connor Hellebuyck show on the weekend, and man, it was awesome. But you'd like to see a little bit more full team effort and performance as opposed to just leaning on your best player to do it all himself.
Yeah, we had joked on Thursday or Friday that Sunday was a definite scheduled loss after if they were to win back to back, and they did, and credit to them for pulling out ahead after that horrible start in LA, and finding their game in the second half of the contest at Mullett Arena on Friday. They really, I thought, pushed in the third period and put the pressure on Arizona until they finally scored on Vejmelka. I was like getting ready to look up Vejmelka's stats against everyone else in the league and against the Jets, because his numbers against the Jets are incredible. And, luckily they were able to, nice play by Dubois at the line to feed Wheeler. But I mean, I felt like I was watching a carbon copy or the sequel to Thursday's game in LA, except this one against Vegas was much longer and was much longer. The Golden Knights outshot the Jets at shot attempted the Jets at 5-on-5, 22-10. But I mean, the actual shots on goal, it was really ugly. I mean, the Jets, they get into these sequences in the game house where they just can't get it out of their own end, and they get shot on and shot on. And Hellebuyck made amazing save after amazing save. Even at the end of the game, they almost lost it there in the dying seconds. Nicholas Waugh in all alone, and Hellebuyck sticks the pads out. It was absolutely incredible to watch him. Your jaws on the floor. Final shots at the end of that game, 48-24 for Vegas. I mean, it's amazing to watch Hellebuyck, but the guy needs some help out there. Shout out to Adam Lowry, who scored his second of the season early into the third period, 13 seconds in. I mean, you got to be pumped about the position that they're in. It's better than losing, because they can kind of try to right the ship here and play like they did last week against St. Louis. But I mean, how many good periods did they really play on this road trip, Hustler? 3, 2. The third period against Arizona, and third period against LA. Maybe throw in one of those second periods. Not exactly a recipe for success, but again, you just took 5 or 6 points, and you're in first in the division, so you're in a decent spot. You bought yourself some time to turn this around, but you can't keep playing like this and expect to win. Or you can, and Hellebuyck's like Dominic Hasek. He's the best goalie we've ever seen. It's incredible.
Interim coach in chat. What's up to everyone in chat, by the way? Says Hellebuyck is, hey, it's what he's paid to do. Steal a couple games a year. It goes the other way at times. Well, it certainly has. There has been a couple of larcenous stealings of points just on this road trip right now. But as you mentioned, they come back with 5 of 6 on the road. And yes, you heard it, folks. The Winnipeg Jets are tied for first in the Central Division right now. Now, all that being said, it is quite tight. You do have the Dallas Stars up at the top of the division, tied with the Winnipeg Jets with the identical 5-3-1 record. The Blackhawks are only 1 point back at 4-3-2. Avalanche, a very middling right now, 4-4-1 through 9 games. And the Minnesota Wild, after that tough start, are back at 4-4-1. Nashville, 3-5-1. Blues, 3-4. They've lost 4 straight after starting off 3-0, and that first loss was here to the Winnipeg Jets a week ago today. And then the Arizona Coyotes at the bottom of the division. I said on Friday, Reem, that I hope that the team came out and played almost guilty for what had happened on Thursday night with the way that Hellebuck went and stole that game. And I'm kind of feeling the same way about Thursday's game. If they had won, or if circumstances were different, I think that first game against a team that is perceived to be, and I stress that word perceived by people, again, we're very early, below them in the standings, might have been a really tough game, mentally to get up for. It should not be now. I think that, in some ways, some of the players we heard yesterday after the game, a little sheepish about the performance. And listen, we know that they can be much better. Hell, a week ago tonight, they played their most complete 60 minutes of the game. That sort of was the blueprint. And I really think they'll be working in practice with those top 2 lines, which of course did look a little bit different throughout the game yesterday, about getting back to the blueprint of that game Monday night. Because I thought at times the third line and the fourth line as well did exactly what the coaches are asking them to do. Got a little too fancy, a lot less simple. And when that happens and the turnovers start, it can be an avalanche going the wrong way for the Winnipeg Jets. And that is why Connor Hellebuck was so busy and needed to be so incredible to squeeze out that point last night.
Yeah, and even on Thursday, it wasn't just, they can't get out of their own end, and then they start taking penalties. Although it seemed like they really struggled to want to call a penalty against Vegas. I know there was definitely Barron got tripped behind the net, but hey, the Jets, they did not have their A game. It was not great. Mason Appleton telling Dan Robertson not even close in, I think, after the second intermission. So I do agree. I think. Well, first of all, I think we joke about the schedule and time zones. However, they have been on the road to start the season. They haven't had an extended homestand, which is coming up here with minimal games. You have 2 games this week and 1 next week before you head out on the road. So you can definitely get some rest here. And I do think fatigue was a factor as back-to-back, the day off, back-to-back wins, Huss, plus the day off, Halloween weekend in Vegas. Look, we saw this coming. Now, however, I mean, it was 2 pretty rough performances. 5 of 6, you got to be happy. I don't know. We'll have to see who shows up Thursday, which team shows up Thursday in Montreal.
Well, as much as we probably should just sit here and talk about Connor Hellebuck and rank his top 10 saves in each game that he basically stole for the Winnipeg Jets, there were a couple, that'll end up on the 1v1, I'm sure, on TSN. The paddle save that he made behind the back last night he's made a lot of incredible saves. That's right up there with the best ever. And he jokingly said afterwards, that wasn't lucky at all. And, had a little bit of a sly grin on his face. But listen, outside of joking about that, it was pretty clear. And Hellebuck is a great teammate. But I don't know about you. I got that he was a little miffed after the game last night. And listen, you get to within 9 seconds of a shootout. I'd imagine that would be the case. Jack Eichel just simply lost Mark Scheifele and went in all alone and ended it in the final seconds of the game. And I know there's a lot of talk about Scheifele, on it. That's what happens when you're on for 2 minutes and 53 seconds in overtime. You can get caught out there, and that's exactly what happened. Eichel took advantage of it and ended it. But you couldn't help but feeling that Hellebuck deserved a bit better of a fate, even though they did get the 1 point and they're coming back with 5 of 6. And, they've got a couple practices right now. I believe 5 games in the next 17 days, Reem. And, assuming that Rick Bowness is back with the club, which fingers crossed that will be the case this week, I imagine there'll be quite a bit of video work based on the last week, the Monday game against St. Louis, the ugly LA and Vegas performances, and try and put the plans in place to come out with a strong start and keep it going for a full 60 minutes like they did the last time on home ice, which had people so excited about the way they played going out on the road.
Yeah, it was a great feeling in the building after that game against St. Louis, who has really taken a nosedive since that loss. And I just want to mention the shot on goals by period last night. I think they look worse than the shot attempts. Vegas, 18 shots to 4 in the first period. Second period, 15 shots to 4. So what is that after 2 periods? The Jets manage 8 shots. Well, Vegas has, what's 18 plus 15? If I do some quick math, 28 plus 5? What is that, 33? So that's pretty bad. Uh, pretty bad, huh? So you can't keep doing this to Hellbuck. He definitely deserves better. You mentioned overtime and the Jack Eichel play. Couple things from that overtime. I see people mentioning it in chat. They did it again. Started with Lowry and Appleton in overtime. Now it worked against Colorado and Pionk scored. I'm not so sure about this strategy. Yes, they seem to like the matchup. I think you got to go out there and try to score, and I don't think those guys give you your best opportunity to score. Meanwhile, Scheifele got kind of ridden pretty hard in terms of shifts at the end, and on that Eichel goal, there was like some controller disconnections or something. They had no legs to chase him around. I mean, it was amazing to watch Jack Eichel dance around the offensive zone, go to the blue line, stop, come back. But you could just see Scheifele and Morrissey there. They were totally finished. I don't know what you got to do for the ice time distribution and overtime to avoid that. We hope Nikolai Ehlers comes back soon.
Well, you know what you need to do? You need to get the puck. You need to get the puck. I mean, and listen, I was as surprised as anyone the first time that Lowry and Appleton got thrown out there. And obviously we all remember the way it ended in Colorado. And I would say the same thing, in the game last night. But when, one team is playing at a different level than the other, there is merits to having your guys that are the best, that gives you the best chance to get the puck, winning a faceoff, keeping the puck for a little while. And that just simply didn't happen for the most part, and why there was so much traffic, so much puck control for Vegas, and why, Mark Scheifele ended up having such a long shift and being absolutely dead to rights at the end of the overtime, and that basically led to the winning goal. The Winnipeg Jets have to find a way to do a better job of getting the puck, holding on to it, and creating quality scoring chances. Now, again, we're talking about 3-on-3 overtime, which by definition, you've both got your point in the bank. I mean, it is aggressive. It is back and forth. But I'll say this, I think last night, if you would have told me, and I think that almost was the plan by the end, can you hang on and get this through to a shootout? Because if it goes to a shootout, you got Connor Hellebuyck in net, and they don't, and you probably got the best chance of possibly get to the second point. That being said, with the talent on the Winnipeg Jets, with the likes of Scheifele, and I know Ehlers is still away, you would like them to be a little bit more competitive at times in that 5-on-3, because on paper, they should be one of the more dangerous teams in the league. And I granted that's probably not happening when Adam Lowry or Mason Appleton are out there, but you might have a better chance of actually having them skate around chasing the puck for a little while as opposed to what we saw.
Yeah, they definitely had a couple chances. Scheifele and Morrissey had a nice drop sequence. Nate Schmidt had a good shot. So they had chances in overtime, but in the end, Jack Eichel took over. We do have to mention, I know a lot of people are talking about this on Twitter, 5 seconds left in regulation on the broadcast for those of us watching at home on TSN. And they cut 5 seconds left, and they cut to a Crave TV promo. Then a couple commercial breaks. I'm assuming someone hit the wrong button, but I was like, kind of like, are we gonna miss overtime here? What's happening? And I jokingly tweeted, like, what is overtime now on a different TSN and they forgot to tell us, like it was a couple weeks ago in the CFL game. But I know a number of people were really unsure, and it seemed like they went to commercial before regulation ended, and you don't see it. I'm assuming it was a mistake, but you're watching at home. They not really telling you what's going on. You're wondering if it's going to come back and what just happened. I think we have to mention that. And then a lot of people, I tweeted out like, ha ha ha, is this on TSN 5 now? And they didn't tell us. And then someone's like, oh, it's the CTV decision jest has already labeled a Jets win or something like that. It's, it always comes back to that. So I think we had
That
to
was
mention.
embarrassing. I don't know how the hell that happened. I mean, you're talking about an NHL broadcast and you just flip over to a Crave commercial at the end of a tie game in the third period when the game is actually happening. I will say this. I was watching with a couple of my friends and, we're on a chair and a couple couches, and the homeowner that I was with when this happened thought that his dog had accidentally pressed a button on the remote control and flicked it over to like a streaming service. It's like, what's going on? We did this frantic look for the remote thinking that we had done it, and then realized that no, in fact, we had no culpability in that. That was in fact, the broadcaster just cutting the game out for a Crave promo at that point in the game. That was ugly.
We have to mention because everyone's watching the game. Like, as you said, you don't know if you accidentally hit something or if something's wrong with the TV, or it was just very odd because I was waiting for this final puck drop. Like Vegas almost went ahead there right before, and they just cut to a commercial. So, I mean, that was kind of the moment everyone was talking about the game because the Jets play was just so poor, as I reiterated these shots against earlier after 2 periods. It was definitely a rough one, but you got to be happy with the spot that they're in overall in the standings, and you hope they can clean up their game going forward.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like if you can gain points and still acknowledge that you need to be way better and make those proper adjustments and make you better going forward. I mean, that's the best case scenario right now. But it's pretty hard to talk about what on paper is just an awesome road trip with 5 or 6 points without acknowledging the fact that the goalie, the best player on the team, has basically put everyone on his back for this next little while. Waiter says, Huss, address the Stone goal. I don't think it was a penalty. Listen, I understand why a lot of Jet fans were irate. They hadn't been to the box at that point in the game. And it certainly did. It could have been called, and that probably is called quite often. I don't know about your thoughts on Reem. I mean, they certainly had the stick there in the skates, but it sort of looked like Barron just blew a tire to me. Like, it didn't look like it actually was a trip. Now, the fact that it leads directly to a chance that ends up in the back of the net for the only goal in regulation for the Winnipeg Jets, a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, especially considering they didn't have a power play. But honestly, when you're under siege the way the Jets were for the majority of the game up until that point, without the puck, I mean, they didn't do a lot to earn a penalty. And in that case, sometimes you'll see that called. In reality, do I think it was a penalty, Waiters? I think I'm sort of with you. I mean, it was borderline. Could go either way. I kind of understand why the referee didn't call it. Would have been nice if he did for the Winnipeg Jets, that's for sure, and certainly for Hellebuck. But let's not even entertain the thought that the reason why the game went the way they did was because of the officials, because I don't think they played an impact almost at all in that game last night.
Yeah, like I thought in real time it was a penalty, but when you go frame by frame, it looks like he was falling a bit. I thought maybe the ref saw that he had kind of lost an edge and was falling and maybe got tipped over a little. You would have liked to see Vegas get a power play. I know some Jets players or the Jets get a power play. I know some of the players, it seemed like they thought it was a tripping penalty there. So, I mean, I don't know. Officiating, like sometimes you get the call, sometimes you don't. And I think it's the inconsistency that's pretty maddening. I know there's some stuff, in the LA game too, where you're watching, like, why didn't they call anything? We do have to mention though, on Friday's game, the Jets got a ton of penalties at the historic first game in Mullett Arena. Huss. I don't think they had a lot of success. I'm just pulling up the numbers here. Yeah, 0 for 5. So I thought they had some good movement. Like Kyle Connor, you said he was going to score 3 goals on this road trip. Somehow he didn't get one. I mean, he's been all over the net shooting. It was got Vejmelka very hard, but yeah, the 0 for 5 on Friday, not ideal. So the power play is something you'd like to see get turned around for sure.
We'll be talking about Kyle Connor because that's obviously a concern right now, the lack of scoring from the best goal scorer on the Winnipeg Jets. And I thought he had another strong game on Friday night. I thought he had a ton of chances, and I was looking at the goal, the expected goals numbers for everybody in the National Hockey League, and he was -4. Essentially, like, it was stunning that he didn't have a number more goals.
Yes.
Did not like his game last night at all. You can single Kyle Connor out. You can basically single out the entire top six. I thought Cole Perfetti really struggled last night. I thought Pierre-Luc Dubois was inconsistent. And I thought all of them as a collective group weren't playing simple enough. They were trying to do a bunch of things that weren't working, and they kept on turning the puck over and ending up taking long shifts, chasing, and basically doing everything they could to desperately help out their goaltender, who was doing it all himself. So Emmer was at the game last night. We'll get to all of this with him coming up in a few minutes, and we're looking forward to having Dave Poulin jump on in just a couple minutes and join us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Before we do that, though, I have to give a big thank you to our friends over at Consolidated Supply, who have been such a great addition to the Winnipeg Sports Talk family. First of all, Joe Spicy and the guys over there, you ever pop in and see him at 1395 Niagara Road? It wouldn't be surprised if maybe WST was on. They are great listeners, and that's how we hooked up. But man, I mean, what an awesome company to have involved with us, with so many possibilities for our customers and obviously listeners. They've been the golf leaders, irrigation, turf, golf cars, and more. And these golf cars, as the club car dealer, have utilization far outside the golf course, potentially out for the summer at a campground or cottage area, and certainly industrial use as well, as they have bigger ones, 2, 3, 4, and 6 seaters as well. But in addition to landscape and irrigation, they've got all sorts of artificial turf, small engine parts as well, and hot tubs, outdoor kitchens, barbecues, and more. Find out what Consolidated Supply can do for you in your next project. Check them out at 1395 Niagara Road East. It's all there, open to the public, and check them out online at cte.ca. Hey, if you're looking for great prices on natural organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, you need to pop by our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market. And when you do, you're supporting a great local company, family-owned and operated since 1936, carrying Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, too. Hey, tomorrow is the beginning of November. It is Men's Health Month, and choosing the right natural health products are key. Vita Health carries everything you need to help relieve prostate issues, reduce stress, and support mental focus from Canadian brands like Prairie Naturals, who donate a portion of sales to the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives, 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at their fully shoppable website at myvita.ca. The gang at Wallace & Wallace are ready for winter. Are you? Got to get into that full winterization list for the home, and don't forget about the garage door. You're going to want to do a quick pressure wash or hose down, which will not only brighten up the curb appeal, but protect the life of your door. And you definitely want to lubricate your rollers and hinges with a high-quality lithium or silicone-based grease. Don't use WD-40, as it can cause problems as temperature drops and doesn't lubricate nylon rollers. But you can also just give the experts at Wallace & Wallace a call and take advantage of their winter maintenance program, their version of a medical checkup for your door. Their technicians will poke and prod their way through a 21-point checklist, making sure your door is ready for the winter ahead. To book your service call, go to wallacedoors.com or call them at 452-2700. All right, Hamilton in Vegas a little later on. We haven't forgot about the Bombers as they get ready for the West Final. We will discuss the final weekend of the Canadian Football League. The Bombers win on Friday, as well as the first weekend of the playoffs. And the game we'll all be paying attention to, that Calgary-BC West semifinal, with Darrin Bauming a little later on. But right now, let's welcome in our good friend, TSN's Dave Poulin, to Winnipeg Sports Talk. Poulin, lots on the docket this weekend. How'd you make it? How'd you make out?
Oh, good. It's, it's so much fun right now. There's so much to talk about and so many different directions. I had a couple of tilts last week. I was with Minnesota last week. I was in both Montreal and I was between the benches on Thursday in Ottawa. And I have to tell you, Andrew, I haven't played in a little while. And I get down between those benches and I gain a whole new respect for the game. It is so fast and they're so big and it is all happening so fast. And when I was first asked, a few years back, I've only been doing color for 5 years. This might be my 6th year. When I was first asked to go between the benches, I thought, I don't think I could see well enough. I don't think I could, get a good enough perspective. And they said, well, just try it. And we had a great producer, Sammy Cicerello. And so I did. And I fell in love with it. Like, I couldn't believe how well I could see and the different perspectives I can pick up and just the energy level. I was thinking about it as a coach. You got guys in front of you. They're always standing up. You're trying to decide who's going out next. You're looking at who's not playing well. And when you're a commentator, you just stand down there and you're right up close and you watch. And man, it was really fun. It was really, really enjoyable. So I had a great week. And then a little panel work on the weekend as well. So quiet game last night with the Leafs. Nothing going on there at all. And out of the corner of my eye, watching Connor Hellebuyck steal a point. It was a good weekend.
Well, I'll ask you about that Leaf situation because I hear the panel was pretty fired up last night. But I've got to ask you about the Jets so far. So, Dave, there was a lot of people, myself included, hoping the Jets could survive these first 10 games. New coach. It was before we even knew that Rick Bowness would be on the shelf for the majority of the first 10 games as well, and playing some really tough competition. The Rangers in Colorado, won a couple games in Vegas. They're coming back home to play the Montreal Canadiens at 5-3-1. And I think anyone would have taken that record on paper looking at it before. And you look at this last road trip, and they're coming back with 5 out of 6 points. But if you watch the games, Dave, this team had no business winning in LA. And last night was vintage Vezina trophy level Connor Hellebuyck. How should the Jets feel about themselves right now? Because it is a results-based business, and the results have been good. But it's hard to imagine there's a lot of success going forward if this is the blueprint.
They should feel very good about the way things have gone early. You started with the unusual situation with your head coach not being available, your new head coach not being available. I think Scotty O'Neill did a tremendous job of stepping in seamlessly and running the show. So that's the first step. Only played 3 of the first 9 at home. And so now 6 of the next 8 games are at home, and you have to make some hay. But 5-3-1 with the record you've had, and the other thing is, you feel like and the strength of this team was going to be that top 6 grouping. Where you took Nikolai Ehlers out of that pretty early, but that's the only forward change you've had to make. And a defense, you've flipped Sandberg and Logan Stanley. And so you've only played 22 players, other than the injury, to Ehlers. You've been fortunate from an injury standpoint. But you mentioned arguably the most important factor with this team, and that is the play of Connor Hellebuyck and the results, Connor Hellebuyck. And I say that because I, like you, don't think his play was that far off last year. But of course, as you mentioned, it's results driven. And before the season, I was talking with Jamie McLennan, who I have so much respect for on his take on goalies at our place. And he told me that Connor was going to have a Vezina type of season. I said, well, why? And he said, well, for every reason. One, he's coming into his wheelhouse age-wise. 2, now he's a couple of years removed, but he's already had the experience of winning a Vezina. And he said, and the third reason, I believe, is Rick Bowness. And he can have that kind of an effect on a goaltender. And you saw the effect he had on Jake Ottinger last year in Dallas. And it sounds funny to say, how does a goalie, although, Rick was a defensive-minded defenseman, how does a goalie, or a coach rather, affect a goalie like that? And it's the system in front of him. But the other positives to look at is no one has really broken out offensively yet. If you were, you talk about being 5-3-1. If you're going to say you're 5-3-1, Ehlers had played 2 games and Kyle Connor had 1 goal, you'd say, well, that's not going to happen. But the scoring has been very balanced. And I mean, you've got a defenseman leading the team in scoring in Josh Morrissey, but it's as much the potential of where this group can and will go offensively. And I think that's a lot of encouraging things right now if you're a Winnipeg Jets fan.
Oh, Brendan Dillon was pretty clear afterwards saying that, hey, I mean, we probably didn't have any business getting a point out of that game, but Connor Hellebuck did it for us. I mean, when you come back and you've got a couple days to practice and you're going through the video and you see some ugly things from the blue paint out, and yet you get the wins, or in this case, a single point. How do the coaches handle that to try to both make sure that the players know that why they got the points, but get back to the performance that they had against St. Louis the Monday before, which, Dave, from the drop of the puck to the final buzzer was the most complete 60 minutes we'd seen from the Winnipeg Jets in a long, long time?
Well, I think you've got a few things in your favor. One, you cut some clips from St. Louis and you pair them with some clips, from some of the things that you weren't as favorable on. But let's start with the goaltender, okay? I'm not sure whether you know this or not, but he shows up twice a month to collect his paycheck too. He's just like us. He's supposed to be good, Andrew.
Yeah.
And I hate the apology that I would get when they'd say, yeah, you guys won a game, but you got great goaltending. And I'd laugh and I'd say, well, wait a second. He's supposed to be good. What do you mean we got great goaltending? Like, it's an excuse. It's not an excuse. And he is one of the top goaltenders in the National Hockey League. And you can't take that for granted. That's a part of the winning components. And if there are nights when you steal a game, so be it. You know what? If there's a night when you win 8-4 or 8-5, he's still going to show up in the 15th and the 30th, just like he always does, and you are too. What I played with 3 different Vezina Trophy winners. And I played with some of the best goalies of my era. Certainly Pelle Lindbergh was. I played with Hextall when he was absolutely at his best. I played with Andy Mogan, Reggie Lemelin. And the goalie that you won't be able to name that I played with who won the Vezina, or you would really struggle to name, is Jim Carey in Washington. When he won
the
it
net
in 94,
detective.
Yes, he did. He won it in 94, 95. And that was a team that was, for those 2 years, was stocked with goalies. We had Donnie Beaupre, we had a young emerging Olaf Kolze. We had Byron Defoe with that group. And we had Rick Tabarachi. And so we had this host of goaltenders, and this kid came in from college. He was a late leave from college because that was the lockout year, and came in and just stole the show, basically. So I'm used to getting good goaltenders. I was always buddies with the goaltenders, Andrew. I think that's because I used to actually come back on my own side of center, and I'd win a faceoff once in a while, and I'd kill a penalty. So I was always buddies with the goalies. But your goalie is a huge part of the formula. And when you've got one of the best, as Winnipeg does, you're allowed to have a game like that and steal a point.
Well, speaking of players like you, Dave, that the goalies probably are enamored with, even in 2 ugly performances by the team in LA and last night, one guy that stepped up late when the team needed it was Adam Lowry. And, Sam Gagner's been playing with him and has looked really, really good on that side, while Mason Appleton's been up in Ehlers' spot. And the Jets' fourth line has been more effective than we've seen in a long time. What have you thought about the Jets' bottom 6 right now? Because I know we talk so much about the top 2 lines, but it seems like the guys towards the bottom that, to be honest, historically, or at least the last few years, haven't chipped in as much, have been a big, big part of the positive results that the Jets have squeaked out.
Here's what I've liked, and that's the willingness to make change with that group. And the tendency, when you're comfortable with a bottom 6 guy, is to stay with it. But that whole fourth line with Gustafsson and Manalainen and Jonsson Fjallby, they're all new. And they all bring a different ingredient. And it's a good size group. I like that about it. Sammy Gagner is an interesting kid because he's so talented offensively. And that's where he was going to make it, was as a big-time offensive player, including an 8-point game, by the way, in the National Hockey League. But that signing appeared to be someone who could be a security blanket if a Nikolai Ehlers were to go down. It would be a top 6 kind of a fill-in role, not on a checking line with Adam Lowry. And yet at this stage of Sam's career, he's going to do whatever has to be done, and he's a smart hockey player. and it's a nice mix. Now, Lowry, I go back to, he was 16 years old the first time I saw him in Swift. It was a game on the road, and he still had the cage on his helmet because he was underage in Major Junior. And we were there to see somebody else. It's often the case. Dave Morrison, our head scout, had taken me to see someone there. I'm not even sure who it was. And I kept asking him about this big, tall, skinny centerman, saying, well, what about that kid? What about that kid? And of course, we had him on our list. And Winnipeg knew too well and stole him a little higher than we had him. But I've always watched, when you get to watch someone when he's 16 and watch him develop, you always watch him with a little different flavor. I still think he scores 20 in the National Hockey League. I think that's the capability of that player, and the defensive side of it, the penalty kill side, the face-off side, the sticking up for your teammates side, that's all there. There's no question about that.
Dave Poulin of TSN's hockey panel with us here, and of course also on the road with the Habs. We'll talk about the Habs in just a minute, but you mentioned that Leaf game last night. Not a great road trip for the Leafs. And I'm sure Jet fans would rather be Jet fans coming out with 5 of 6 and maybe saying, geez, you get to be a little bit better than what's going on there. What's happened on this road trip, and how fiery did things get with the fellas last night after the Ducks loss?
Well, they essentially played one game on the road trip, and that was in Winnipeg. And that was the front end of it. And that was their best effort by far, which Jets fans don't want to hear. And then they went out and stumbled through the West, literally, and just totally out of sync. And you're watching a team that has incredibly high expectations, and they're just not operating on all cylinders. They're not operating on half their cylinders. There's a lot to work out there, all the way around. They're thin on D, and their bigs aren't getting it done. So you look, when you have bigs of the stature they have to get it done. They do. And in the last couple of years, they've been able to change out the bottom 6 with pretty rapid regularity. But that hasn't clicked in this year either with the free agents they've signed. They'll bring a guy in like a Mikheyev, and then once he earns a paycheck, they can't pay him because they have no cap space. And so then he moves on, or even an Andre Kasher or guys that have moved on. And so they've got some significant work to do. And it got heated with our group, a couple of different reasons. One, there was a penalty shot situation that happened on each side. We actually put them side by side on the screen. And it was pretty cool because the young referee at one end didn't call the penalty shot. And so he didn't call the penalty shot for Anaheim. And then a short time later, there was a very similar circumstance, and Alex Kerfoot got a penalty shot. And so that was part of the discussion on what are the real workings on a reasonable chance on a penalty shot. And my argument, and I was going back and forth with Dregs, was I understand the letter of the law is a reasonable opportunity, but who's making the decision on the reasonable opportunity? Maybe that isn't what I wanted to do on the penalty shot. And so it's not my reasonable opportunity. And that was quite feisty. And then one of the star players, Mitch Marner, had a couple of turnovers that led directly to goals. And, he's a pretty airtight defensive player normally. And when that happened, particularly at 3-1, he had a sloppy play in the third period that led to Anaheim's second goal. And Sheldon Keefe immediately called a timeout and got into them pretty good, but then sat Mitch Marner. So when he sat him, I said, okay, this can't be one shift. It's got to be more than that. It can't be the token, we're going to sit a star player for one shift, and it was one shift. And he was right back out there. So we had a lot of these points, and then there was a goal called back. And once again, Dregs has such excellent access, to the situation room on the interpretation of that. And when it came back, and we could not believe to a man on the panel, Dregs, Jeff O'Neill, myself, and even James Duthie, who weighs in on these situations, it was like, okay, there's no way this goal is being called back. Our producers, everybody in the studio is like, there's no way this goal is being called back. And sure enough, it's called back. And so it was like, the Leafs got a couple of significant breaks with the non-penalty shot and the goal called back. And yet, young Trevor Zegras finds a way to win it. in overtime. So it was a feisty panel. We got into it pretty good, and it was pretty spirited. And, working with those guys, always a pleasure for me. I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy the back and forth very much, particularly during the heat of a battle.
You guys want some more views? Just get ODOG mic'd up and live on the cam during the game. I can't imagine the laughs and the reactions you get in real time from ODOG, especially when the Leafs aren't playing particularly well. He always wears his heart on his sleeve.
So we're looking at kind of a Manning situation is what you want, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. So you want a Manning situation. That would be very festive, I'm sure. A lot of which maybe you can't actually say on television, but he's a former Leaf and he wears it on his sleeve. And Greg's is the ultimate voice of reason. He's our Western guy, right? He's the ultimate voice of reason and brings a toughness to it as well. Greg's was a tough player, growing up. And so it's a fun group. And you might imagine even putting the pieces together, Puffy, our associate producer, Sean, that puts the pieces together, he's a part of the conversation too, and he builds the packages for us. So it's a good team effort on all fronts.
Poulin, you're also heavily involved in the Habs broadcasts on TSN. Of course, Montreal is here on Thursday. You'll be coming here to our fine city. 5-4 through 9. What are we going to see from this young Habs team that shows up on Thursday? Tell us about their start to the season.
Low expectations going into the season from everyone else outside the organization. And I had seen them play, obviously, working and being close to the team after Martin St. Louis took over last year, The change in the individuals was the most significant thing. And they didn't end up in great results through the second part of last year. But I watched guys get better, none more so than Cole Caulfield. Well documented. He had 1 goal before St. Louis showed up and 22 goals afterwards, in a half a season. And he's a really talented player and reading on all cylinders with Nick Suzuki right now. They haven't quite found the piece on the right side. They've tried different players there. Most recently, Kirby Dach has skated up there. And so you may see him up there. But Suzuki's really slick. He's smart. He's a player that came over. He was one of Vegas's 3 first-round draft picks that first year, all of whom have been traded. And he was the middle one between Cody Glass and Eric Brandstrom. And he was part of the Pacioretty trade. He's really good. He's really smart. He's a good defensive player. He's the new captain of the team. But I think they went in with expectations that were quite low, and they decided to give the young kids a shot. They still have some contract situations to work through, Andrew. The number of players that I would expect, maybe shopped at the trade deadline as this team continues to grow. But they've played well, and Jake Allen gives them a nice option in net. But I think the talking points of the team center around the young defensemen that are playing. And the most notable is Caden Gooley. And this kid is a stud. He was the Western League MVP last year in the Memorial Cup for Edmonton. He's a really good player. He is a really good all-round defenseman. He can be physical. He's up ice. He scored a great goal the other night. He's the leader of the pack. The second one, much quieter, but he came in and played 10 games last year after graduating from Northeastern. Third-round pick, Jordan Harris. And not an overly big guy, but a real puck transporter. Might remind you of a little bit of Josh Morrissey, and Montreal fans would probably be thrilled to hear that comparison. He's good. He's smart. He doesn't try and do too much. He'll get up ice. He uses his skating. And then the player that has caught everyone's attention is Arbor Jackeye. And first of all,
he's a killer.
He is. He's a good player, though, Andrew. This was a free agent. It's a great story. Stevie Stais traded for him when he was in Hamilton with the Bulldogs, and he called me and said, I might have just got the toughest kid in the OHL. And I knew a little bit about him because he had played in Kitchener for Mike McKenzie. And so to watch him, he went on to the Memorial Cup. But last year he went to camp with Montreal as a free agent, never drafted. 6'4", 235 pounds. But he can play. He's a good skater. He can move. He thinks the game pretty well, but he's really tough. And he likes the toughness. And the last name is XHEKAJ. which comes out Jacka. Now, if you write it out phonetically and then say it backwards, that sounds a lot more like Jacki than XHEKAJ does. Look at that little exercise. And one of the best nicknames in hockey right now, Chris Weidman dubbed him Wi-Fi, because when you write out XHE, it looks like a Wi-Fi password that they give you that you immediately change. So, the nicknames, of Poulin or Dregs or whatever it may be, now that's a nickname. And no one thought, no one. He wasn't expected to step in and play in the NHL this year, but he has more than held his own and got pretty good skills. And you might think of a young Brendan Dillon, and in that type of player, up on his toes, very aggressive, very supportive of his teammates. And, if he has a career like Brendan Dillon has had, you'd be very happy with it. But those three guys are getting a lot of looks on defense. They're being very patient with them. And Justin Barron is a fourth who's down in the minors right now. He's the only right shot of the group. He was the first round pick from Colorado that came over in the Lehkonen deal. So, I think things are looking up in Montreal. I think they're significantly behind where Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit are in the Atlantic Division curve for younger teams who have restocked and resupplied. And I'll say that rather than rebuild. But some good things are happening in Montreal right now.
Hey, what about Johnny Kovacevic, our old pal here from the Moose? And a lot of people really disappointed that he was even put on waivers by the Winnipeg Jets, and he got snapped up quickly. He's played in all the games, averaging 17 and a half minutes a night, Dave. I mean, obviously keeping his head above water there in his new home. He's
looked very comfortable. And, he'd only played 4 games for the Jets, and because of the depth of their defense, particularly on the right side, you like what you see, and it stays status quo. You look at the guys the Jets have, and he sort of slipped through, and that happens with guys, but he's a big guy and he's fit in right well. And I think, very possibly if Justin Barron had a really good camp, he may have been the right shot, and they may have kept 4 young kids up, but they didn't, and they needed a right shot. And Kovacevic became available, and, so that goes back to the organization, and someone says, okay, now it may have been back as far as somebody saw him play in Hawkesbury or with the Junior Senators. And then at Merrimack for 3 years, and then another 3 years plus with the Moose. And, and that's the draft and development prospect. The problem is, if you really like that exact position, you try and sneak guys through waivers sometimes. That may have been what's happened with Kovacevic, and he wasn't able to sneak through, and Montreal grabbed him.
Poulin, just before we go out to the West Coast, the Canucks had that disastrous start. They got a win. Then they beat Pittsburgh. They've won 2 in a row. Is their season in this situation salvageable right now? And how much does just a couple wins do for a group that was under incredible pressure and scrutiny?
Well, it depends on the group. It's going to help this one out an awful lot, and it's going to help that coach out an awful lot. It's going to quiet things down a lot out there. And, those 2 wins, and they were back-to-back nights as well. So they had Pitt coming in on the second one. And, it's funny how extreme things are at the start of a season. Everything is so magnified at the start of a season. Really 3 times during the year: the start of the season, before the trade deadline, and the end of the season. And those seem to be dog years in days, almost 7-to-1 ratio, where you lose a game and you think the world is ending. It was pretty dire out there in Vancouver. And, we talk about Connor Hellebuck. Well, they talk about Thatcher Demko, and he's got to be good for them. And he was over the weekend, but didn't have to steal the games. Some guys woke up, some guys started playing, and not coincidentally, the game against Seattle, they fought twice in the first minutes of the game. I think the Tanner Pearson fight was right out of the gate, and the JT Miller fight was shortly after. Now, Tanner Pearson doesn't fight, and he goes out. That fight he wasn't fighting a Seattle Kraken. He was fighting for the Vancouver Canucks, and he was fighting for his teammates, and he was showing that there was fight left in the team. And so that was a fight that was symbolic, I thought, to the fact that they hadn't quit. And even the player that was doing it, whatever was discussed beforehand, I think it was one of them fought Connor Soucy, who was a pretty tough kid. But it wasn't who you were fighting. It was the fact that you had fight left in you. And I don't mean, literal fight. I mean figurative fight. And so those two things, the combativeness, seemed to pick up in those games. They were able to beat Seattle in the tight one and able to beat Pittsburgh. So is it too late? Of course it's not too late in pure number of games, but it was looking pretty dire in Vancouver.
Poulin, this is going to be awesome to have you back in the Peg on Thursday. Enjoy the trip, travel safely, and we'll look forward to the Jets and Habs Thursday night and another visit with you on Winnipeg Sports Talk in the coming weeks. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, there's some good stuff with Dave Poulin, talking some Jets and all the other happenings around any of the Canadian teams in the National Hockey League. And Poulin will be here as part of the TSN Habs team doing the game coming up on Thursday night. Why not question of the day? We're going to dive into this. Jeff Hamilton was on the trip. He's going to join us from Vegas in just a moment. But why not question of the day? With the great results in the standings, the way the team played, what were your takeaways from this last road trip for the Winnipeg Jets? I'm sure there's a lot of mixed feelings amongst Jet fans. Bottom line, though, we're talking about a team that's tied incredibly for first place. Hit us up in the comments of the YouTube broadcast, and as well, you can always hit us up in the chat as well. Our friends at Not Auto Corp, of course, are the place to go when you're beginning the search for a new vehicle or an upgrade on your current one. And they are also the leaders in electric vehicles here in Manitoba. Check out the Tesla Experience program featuring overnight or weekend-long Tesla experiences, the opportunity to learn about electric vehicles and technology from the Tesla experts. Those EV cars payments begin at $4.99 bi-weekly and have no gas expenses. And the weather is so gorgeous right now. I don't even want to mention that winter is, of course, just around the corner. But if you do want to get ready for winter tire specials and an MPI payment plan available at Knott, why not get safe winter tires now and pay later? And warranty-approved servicing and maintenance repair on all makes. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, head on down to Waverly and McGillivray. Why not get in the car of your dreams with the help of the Knott team? And you can also check them online at knott.ca. Well, the gang at Royal Sports are ready for November. And ready for the West Final, a full drop of new Bomber toques, scarves, and more to get you ready for repping the blue and gold in 2 weeks on the 13th of November available. Tons of new Jets merchandise as well, and thousands of pieces of Jets merch available for you over at Royal Sports. Also got a ton of NFL gear, Major League Baseball, NBA, and Raptors. And, of course, the biggest and best selection of Canada soccer gear for everybody getting ready for Canada to return to the World Cup, which, if you can believe, is starting in just over 3 weeks. And Royal, also the hockey superstar for over 40 years, family-owned. Head on down to 750 Pembina Highway for all of your sports needs on and off the playing surface. And follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And for those of you looking ahead to November, December, the holiday season, how's the wardrobe looking, fellas? If it's time to upgrade your wardrobe, you know where to go. F Apparel, 190 Smith Street. Andrew and the gang have the best selection in men's clothing and custom suits beginning at just $400. And right now, buy one suit, get one for 30% off for those of you that need a full wardrobe update or if you're wearing a suit each and every day. And guys, if you're looking at a wedding and are involved in a wedding party for next month, if you and the wedding party book your suits from F and get measured by the end of November, everyone will receive 10% off their custom suit and get a free shirt as well, savings of up to $130 per person. F Apparel, 190 Smith Street downtown. Check them out or make an appointment online at that's EPHapparel.com. All right, let's head down to Sin City. Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press joins us now after being on the road for a week. Smart move, taking an extra day before coming back. The Jets survived the weekend. Did you?
I'm here to speak about it. Am I not, Hustler? I mean, it was
You're looking like $1 million US
you-
tax-free. I'm actually quite impressed.
Yeah, well, I'm it's crazy what a good cry in the shower every morning can do for you, heading into the day. So it's no, it was a good weekend, it's about as good weekend as the Jets. As far as points go, 5 out of 6 is pretty darn good, but certainly a privilege to do what I do and to be able to do what I do in May and then Arizona and now Sin City, which I think this is my first time in Vegas. So kind of I haven't got swallowed up by anything, but certainly got to see a great city, and veteran move to push it a day.
Well, you mentioned you're privileged to do what you do. Members of the Winnipeg Jets are privileged to do what they do in front of Connor Hellebuck, who is playing at a maybe even a better than his Vezina level. Jeff, the two performances by Hellebuck were almost by any standard grand larceny for 3 points out of that LA game, and of course last night. Let's focus in on last night. How did it look to you from the press box in Vegas, and just how damn good was 37 in the net?
I think it looked exactly the way everybody else would have seen it, whether that be on TV, whether you were one of those Jets fans, and there were lots of them in the arena last night. Yeah, an absolute onslaught. I mean, it never really held up. It was right from the beginning. I think the Jets, it's Scott O'Neill mentioned this, and I tend to agree. I thought before they took that penalty early, it wasn't that bad of a start, particularly when you compare to the starts against the LA Kings and Arizona. But that penalty came within the first 4 or 5 minutes of the period, and then it was just garbage from there, really. And as you mentioned, the Jets had no business winning that game. They had no business getting a point, and you kind of were left with thinking, well, what if Jack Eichel doesn't drive the net, score with 6 seconds left in overtime? The Jets are in a pretty good situation to go into a shootout with what we saw from Connor Hellebuck. And it really was just another great performance from him. We saw the same thing to start the road trip against an LA Kings team that the Jets definitely made look better than they are. I'd mentioned this on the Kenny and Rennie show last night, and in my game story, for that game was that wasn't the feel good LA Kings that we saw last season. The ones that rose above expectations, got into the playoffs, third place in the Pacific Division. They've kind of come back to life and have struggled and entered that game allowing the most goals in the NHL. And so 40 saves that night, 46 saves yesterday. I mean, talking to Connor Hellebuck afterwards, it's, and I said this, last night as well, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but there was a clear frustration. And I don't know if the frustration was the goal that he allowed with 6 seconds left, and knowing that probably analyzing his own game and thinking he could have played that better. He said as much. He said he wished he would have poke checked there, or if it was the frustration of what he witnessed for the first 64 minutes before that, or a combination of the two. But at this point in time, I mean, these new systems, we spent a lot of time talking about them. They're definitely concentrated towards a more defensive game. We've heard Scott O'Neill and Rick Bowness say in the past they don't want to have Connor Hellebuck having to put in the nights that he's put in both those games where he's constantly being worked, especially this early in the season. But at the same time, I mean, this is a guy that they lean on heavily. They've leaned on heavily in the past, and watching him perform the way he's performed after, I think we can say last year, I mean, he had a good season in my opinion, but I don't think he had a good season in terms of, when you compare it to what we've seen from him in previous years. To see him playing the way he's playing now, you just have to wonder, what if the Jets can get back, to, having special teams that are not in the bottom third, if they can get guys like Kyle Connor going, if they can, do things that we were expecting and still have the play of Connor Hellebuck, this team could be a pretty dangerous club.
Yeah, I mean, we have to start with Hellebuck because he was just that brilliant and was the reason why the team came back and finds himself in first place right now. But I'm glad you mentioned that because I sort of took that as well. I watched his post game, and he's a very intense guy. He's a goalie. He's out there at times, but it was quite clear that I don't want to say he was biting his tongue, but I think part of it was biting his tongue. And it would have been hilarious if they actually found a way to win that game in a shootout or something, Jeff. And then,
They
we
should have
would've
won the
gotten
game. That's the craziest thing. If you
the
look at the
post-game-
overtime, they were the better team in the overtime. They could have won that
Yeah.
game. That's the crazy part.
Yeah, I did find. Well, I mean, they were sort of, but I mean, when you get stuck out for shifts as long as Mark Scheifele did, there was certainly an attrition overall. I mean, they did have a couple chances. I kind of thought that they were chasing quite a bit, and then, it's all about possession. You need to have the puck to be able to change, and whether they missed an opportunity to do that and got stuck out a long time, it was quite clear that Scheif just did not have the gear that Eichel did on that final goal, and that was a part of it. But I brought that up because if they had won and the Jets social media team was recording the jacket presentation, you could have had Connor Hellebuck giving him the jacket. And I'm not sure that that's ever happened, but there would have been simply no other choice last night for it. I did like the fourth line, and I continue to like the fourth line, and I think Scott Arniel continues to put them out in more higher leverage situations. And for whatever reason, Adam Lowry in these games where they really need something from somebody, he's done it twice on this road trip in games that this team really didn't have much business being in these games, scoring big goals. The top six, though, was rough, and we saw some changes both in the line going into the game. We saw a swap of centers right now, Jeff. Kyle Connor's right at the top of the list for struggles not scoring. But what did you see from the two lines that really are going to carry the load for the Winnipeg Jets over the course of the road trip?
I see them, when we talk a lot about the concerns or the risks of converting back to that old style of game, that freelance, the outside of the what are clearly defined and structured systems that Rick Bowness is trying to implement with this team. I think maybe they put a lot of pressure on themselves to get back in these games, and they go a bit rogue. And that was I thought Scott Arniel's biggest message yesterday, right? I mean, he says, at the same time complimenting the bottom six, Adam Lowry's line, the fourth line, I thought David Gustafson had a great game. That those two lines have been pretty consistent all season long beyond just this road trip. I think you could argue that those two lines were the best lines through this road trip for sure. But when Scott Arniel says, when he compliments that bottom six about how they're making the simple plays, they're playing within the systems, that everyone needs to look alike. And then that's a subtle shot against his top six, that they're not making the simple plays, that they're, maybe they're holding their sticks a bit too tight. If you want to do any of those cliches, when things get out of control in the game, they're not trusting the systems. The bottom six are, and they're getting rewarded for it. Now, I think that's normal. I think there's certainly some different competition. I mean, Mark Scheifele's being, his line in particular, he's being asked to take on more responsibility against the opposing team's top lines. We've seen that a lot more this season, at least to start a year, than we have in previous. So there is obviously stiffer competition, but I think the concern here with them is that they just kind of revert to their old style. They go back to, and that's going to happen, unfortunately, when you have the starts that the Winnipeg Jets are having. I mean, we can talk about how great the fourth line's been, how consistent the third line's been, but it's the top two lines that are logging the most amount of ice time. And when you're logging the most amount of ice time, you have the greatest impact on the game. That's just obvious. And when you're not playing within the structured systems, when you're not leading by example, there are concerns. And I think that's why, I think you can look at this road trip and you can compartmentalize it in two different ways. You can say, okay, 5 out of 6 points. I think any team would take 5 out of 6 points on a road trip, particularly one that has 3 games in 4 nights. But you can also look at it and how they did it. And you wonder if they do get that victory yesterday, you wonder if it just blankets over all the issues. Because I think what I appreciated last night in the players that did speak was the full acknowledgement that yes, 5 out of 6 is good, but this is nothing to celebrate over what we've achieved our goal to a certain degree in points, but we haven't achieved our other goals in finding that consistency within our systems and finding, our game, especially, what we saw in the St. Louis game. I mean, that was as complete a game that looked like when the systems are rolling, when all 4 lines are looking the same, that's what it's going to look like. Well, that win against St. Louis looked nothing like any of the 2 wins and then the overtime loss on this road trip. And so while the Jets are continuing to rack up points, I don't think they're moving, in the right direction and where this team needs to be to have long-term success. Now, I'm not saying it won't happen or that it's impossible. And again, I think a big part of it has to do with such slow starts. When you're trailing, when you're playing from behind, I don't think these players believe, or at least the top 6 believe, that that the defensively minded systems they're playing are going to be enough to get back into games. And so I think you see them cheating the game a bit more. And then as you mentioned, Haas, the switch up in lines, that was meant to get Connor going, but a result of watching 2 lines not playing well together, kind of only, reverting back to maybe individual tendencies, trying to put the game on their own backs. That's what you want your stars to do. But the Jets want their stars to play within their system and be effective, not try to go rogue there. And I think that's where the things get a little bit less, okay, 5 out of 6 points, and more, okay, is this going to work down the stretch? Because the games are only going to get tougher. The competition is only going to get tougher. And let's face it, they can't rely on Connor Hellebuyck to put 40 plus save performances so that they can squeak out these victories. And the one last thing I'll say on that was, this is the good news. We knew there was going to be growing pains, so no one should be surprised that the Winnipeg Jets are struggling right now. They are so used to a different system that it's going to take some time for them to be committed in this. And the good news is they're winning games while they're going through the growing pains, because this team could very well be 2-5-1, and be going through these growing pains, and then you don't have any of the good feelings, and then it's even tougher to adopt the system. So that's the good news in all this, that we knew this was going to be a situation early on in the season, and 9 games in, they're sharing the lead with the Dallas Stars at the top of the Central Division.
Obviously we hope that Rick Bowness is feeling a lot better and he'll be back on the bench this week and hopefully back at practice when the team gets back to it in advance of the game against the Montreal Canadiens. But I was mentioning to the guys I was watching the game with last night, can you imagine to be a fly on Bones's wall watching what was going on, and probably feeling pretty helpless as well as things were going on? But, from Rick Bowness's perspective, as the guy that understands the results that you need, the wins that you need to make, and the way that this team won games, I imagine he's quite fired up to get back onto the ice with his club, remind them about the shortcomings, but also focus on some of the things that they did well in previous games, because he's missed, basically, what is it, 8 of 9 games so far this season. For me, part of the reason why I maybe sounded pretty disappointed on Friday's show, despite the win in LA, was that we spent so much time, and the show was a real fun place for Tuesday and Wednesday, considering the way the Jets played against a team like St. Louis and put that 60-minute effort together. And, it was far, far from that over the course of the trip. But as we mentioned, you get 5 of 6 points. Now I don't know whether I'm with you. I'll put it this way. I think there's a real psychological challenge by the coaching staff to, at the same time, reinforce the fact that, hey, you've had some good results, but also need to get to where those results start. And it can't be hanging it all on 37 to show everyone that he's worthy of winning another Vezina trophy. And, both what the way things look on the ice, who everyone's playing with, but also what the coach is saying, I think it'll tell us a little bit about the real focus, about what he thinks about this team through 9 games. Because, as I said, if you told anybody in the Jets fan base that this team would be tied for first in the Central after 9 games, what they're going through, they would have taken it in a heartbeat, and I'd still do. And maybe you've got a team that's playing a little and practicing a little guilty in these next couple days to get ready for Montreal and this 3-game homestand of some more very winnable games, if they want to make a point of not wasting these performances by Connor Hellebuyck and kind of being ahead of maybe where they should be at this time. That's a good thing.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's some things you can take away from this, and implementing systems, getting a team to buy in is more than just executing the X's and O's, and a lot of it is on the mental side. And I mean, particularly over a 3-game road trip over 4 days. I mean, Scott O'Neill said it after yesterday's loss. He said, these things are as mental as anything, where you need to, you need to be mentally tough. And I just feel, I think we're getting more and more from this. Clearly there was a disconnect between Mark Scheifele and Paul Maurice. I mean, and I don't think that was limited to Mark. I think it's there's been comments throughout this trip. There's been comments all season, not so subtle, and it's sometimes subtle shots against the previous regime and learning it, right? And I think, my takeaway in that is that I feel Paul Maurice enabled this team to be mentally weak. I think that he babied them. I think that he would fix. You don't need to come out and and say these guys need to be better, but Paul was always reluctant to say anything negative, to rattle any cages, and we've seen a stark.
Who can never forget? I
mean,
liked our game.
Exactly, and and Scott Arniel doesn't pull any punches.
Seriously? Yeah,
totally. Yeah, it was comical in some cases, and I also think, and this has kind of been tossed out because there's a lot of things to like about him. He's a good man. He's certainly a good presenter, but he clearly wasn't as good as a communicator with his players compared to these guys. And when you communicate with your players the way that we've seen Rick Bowness do, Scott Arniel, Brad Lauer, Johnston, who also made a comment. I mean, he said, as we were talking about Mark Scheifele earlier in the day, that he challenged the top six to get in the dirty areas and score those goals, that you're going to score your skilled goals. But if you want to be a superstar in this league, you got to score the other ones too, And so my point in that is that when you bring the players along for the ride, when you are able to answer the questions and work with them as closely as this coaching staff is to implement these systems, I think you're more comfortable being critical of them and challenging them openly in the public, because you're saying the same things to them, in the locker room. They're not finding out over this. And I'm not sure that was the case with Paul Maurice. And so that's a refreshing look. And I think that's what, I think should give fans hope that you might not be seeing the buy-in right now, or you might not be seeing it in the way that you hope for or imagine. It will be 10 games after Thursday's game against Montreal, 10 games into the season. But I have a trust in this coaching staff to be effective and to get their message across and hold those guys accountable, because, you're getting great play from the bottom two lines, and there's a reason for that. That's coaching to me. That's those guys buying into the system and executing it in the way that they're supposed to be doing. Now, again, they have different roles than the top two lines who are relied on to score goals. But at the same time, there's the expectations to look the same, to play particularly the same in the defensive zone. Those top six players are going to get a longer leash. That's just normal. That's what happens when you make the big bucks, when you relied on to score goals. But that leash will not be nearly as long as it was, I think, under Paul Maurice.
Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press joining us following the Jets taking 5 of 6 on the road in LA, Phoenix, and last night in Vegas to round it out. Team off today. They'll get back to practice tomorrow, hopefully with Rick Bowness on the ice. A lot of talk about Kyle Connor in the chat right now. This is a guy that was a scoring machine last year, and he was the one thing that was really consistent throughout the year, Jeff. Death taxes and Kyle Connor lighting the lamp. Hasn't happened at all. He's yet to beat a goalie. It's 1 goal, an empty netter. What's going on with KFC?
Well, if you want to get tinfoil hat and not, whatever, Ken Weed predicted that he was going to tuck 50 this year. So is this the Kenny Cursive play here?
We've mushed him.
And I think a lot of people had high expectations for him. And here's the thing: this guy is such a prolific scorer. We know what he's capable of doing. Okay, he's one of the best. You can argue he's one of the best scorers, in the National Hockey League, and has been for a couple of years consistently. And so when you look at 1 empty net goal through 9 games, yeah, it's shocking, to say the least. But it would be one thing if he wasn't getting opportunities. Kyle Connor is all over the ice. He's not playing a perimeter game. He's getting shot opportunities. He's got tons of shots. He's got tons of shot attempts. They're just not going for him. And I mean, same thing's happening over there in the hockey universe in Toronto with Austin Matthews. I mean, his starts was slow as well. I mean, you go in these these streaks. You go in streaks where you're scoring goals and everything, is going for you. And then you go on streaks where everything's not going for you. And clearly Kyle Connor is in one of those streaks where things are not going for him. But again, there's enough there to see in the games, to see him generating, opportunities, shots, all those things. They're just not going for him. That's why Mark Scheifele has no assists. You know what I mean? Like it's so as troubling as it is, I don't think it's panic button yet. But and here's the other thing: Kyle Connor is an ultimate goal scorer. True and true. This is bothering him. He likes nothing more than scoring goals and helping his team out in that way. He knows he's relied on, so it's not like he's brushing off his nuts. I hope he's not putting too much pressure on himself. Because the reality is the goals are going to come. It's just surprising that it's taken this long.
It has, and it'll be. I'm very much intrigued as to how they handle these lines, what they look like in practice over the next couple of days, what they're working on. Because this is the one time we talked a lot about the schedule and how once they finally started playing, they had so many games in such a short period of time. I believe Poulin just said it's 5 games in the next 17 days, Jeff. This is a time to spend more time on the practice rink, more time to really get at the core of what the priorities of the coaching staff are and have this team dialed in right out of the puck drop like they were against St. Louis last Monday for this upcoming homestand. But where to go with Scheifele and Dubois? We saw the swap of those guys last night. We had Cole Perfetti playing up. And I guess there's the other, it would be a nice problem to have. It would be nice to get Nikolai Ehlers back and then have to figure out where everyone sits. But from what we heard after the game, I'm not sure we should be expecting Nikolai Ehlers' return imminent, if you will, if he wasn't even skating while the team was on the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of been, that plays to the mental side of this team. I mean, the Jets have struggled several times over the last several years when one key guy is out, right? I mean, Nikolai Ehlers is no doubt a key piece of this team. You can make the argument, he's a real true game changer. He can change the game in one flick of the puck or one speed burst, and they're certainly missing him. But yeah, a troubling sign. I mean, we saw him on the trip. I mean, he doesn't, Logan Stanley was wearing a walking boot. Now, walking boots these days don't really tell you much. Guys wear walking boots to recover, to rehab, could be broken there to compress it for whatever, a couple hours, and it's a nothing burger. But so we saw him, he's in good spirits, but it is concerning that he's not hitting the ice. And so you wonder, what that nagging injury is. And how long he's going to be out. And that's kind of the weird thing in all this, right? Like we talk about the negatives, and they're certainly there. They're right in front of our face. We see it in their play and falling first periods. We see the positives and where they are in the standings and carving out wins and the player Connor Hellebuyck. But you got to look at it, and this isn't excuses. This is just reality. Like, where is this team going to get to when the special, when the special teams start clicking, when the power play starts clicking, when Kyle Connor inevitably scores goals, when Nikolai Ehlers comes back, when their head coach returns to the bench? I mean, these, a lot of these issues are typical professional hockey issues. I'd say minus the head coach being out as long. And this isn't something like, this is a new coaching staff. And so it's not like these guys have been around for years and that these guys, like Rick Bowness is the heartbeat of this team. The players certainly have a ton of respect for the supporting cast. And Scott Arniel, I think is a great coach. I think he's a great communicator. I think all of them are great communicators, but the leader of this team, as you mentioned, Haas, has been there for one game. He's the guy whose message needs to get in everyone's ears. That's what good head coaches do. They're the ones that handle everything. They don't work the forwards. They don't work the defense. They're not going in, dissecting the power play and the penalty kill. They're there in the ears of the players during practice, during, whatever off ice sessions, and particularly on the bench. And again, I'm not saying that the message isn't necessarily strong with the other guys, but how important it is when Rick Bowness gets in your ear and tells you what you need to do. So, I think it's easy to look at the negatives and reflect on them and suggest that there are issues here. And I certainly think that's the case. The Jets can't get away with what they've been doing right now and expect to be in the playoffs or have any success this season. But when you look at what they haven't had and what they're essentially going to be getting here in the near future, in the sense that Rick Bowness, I think, is going to be back this week. I'm not saying that's a for sure, but in talking to Scott O'Neill yesterday, that seemed to be where it was headed. That he was, I think he might be joining. I wouldn't be surprised if he was joining them the next time they hit the ice for practice. So what if we kept talking about the bonus effect and how that was going to be the number one thing this year to turning this club around? Well, Rick Bowness, as we've talked about a couple times already, has been there for one game. So we don't even know what the bonus effect is, and that hasn't been at play. So, I think I think the issue too is that they can't be happy with what they're doing. They can't look at these games at these things and be like, this is our success. And I don't think they are, but I think with Rick Bowness coming back, it's just going to be, again, hammering that message into play while also doing pretty well through the first 9 games.
Hey, you know what? You mentioned Logan Stanley being out. We've seen Dylan Samberg for the last couple of games, and I actually thought that Samberg last night, on a couple of occasions, showed glimpses of a guy that, not only can he handle his own business in his own end, but for a guy that we think of as a real stay-at-home defenseman, he had a couple of really key passes last night that set up the Jets for a couple glorious scoring opportunities. It just they just weren't able to get past the net. And you look at the numbers, like certainly the analytic numbers from last night's game. I mean, Neil Pionk and Josh Morrissey had a nightmare game, but they're often were playing with the top 6, who often was finding themselves chasing the puck and really under siege last night. That third pairing, though, and Samberg, and I think he had Logan Stanley raised the bar with the way he played before he went out of the lineup. But I thought Samberg got more comfortable game by game right now. And, last night, despite, a pretty lopsided game overall in gameplay, he sort of stood out to me as a guy that, is getting more confident and acquitted himself quite well.
Absolutely. Take exactly what you said, and then you add in the fact that he didn't have a great game against LA. That was his first game back. I think one of the turnovers led to a goal on his, and so for him to answer back over the last 2 games, and no one's suggesting that this guy's lighting the game on fire or whatever, but he's certainly showing signs of progress and evidence and comfortability. Because let's face it, this guy had a shot before and he got injured at a training camp and missed a lot of time. I mean, that plays on the mental side. He's gone through a lot of adversity with injuries early in his career, and to see him kind of rebound, and if the boot does turn out to be an issue with Logan Stanley, then Dylan Samberg is going to need to be relied on night in and night out. And so I certainly saw the same thing as you, Huss, and I'd add another guy in there, in Cole Perfetti. Now it's a bit of a different story. I think Cole's had a pretty consistent season all year round, but for him to answer back the way he did after a tough night in LA, not necessarily because he wasn't playing well, but because the Jets opened the first period with four penalties, and he's not on the penalty PK. So, he couldn't get into a rhythm. And then to see the way he played against Arizona, I mean, for my money, he was the best player on the ice that game. And so to see these young guys come in and show confidence and show progress and taking steps in the right direction, and I'd put that towards the fourth line too. I think there's a difference here. I think the culture, the workmanlike culture that the coaching staff is implementing this year, I think the fourth line feels more part of it than they ever have. I mean, this isn't my opportunity to dump all over Paul Maurice and whatnot, but we know that he never played the fourth line. We know he never really gave them an opportunity to earn the opportunities to get more opportunities. And we've seen that with the fourth line, whether that was out in the last shift of the second period, in yesterday's game, just you relied on in late in other games. They're getting rewarded because they're putting in good shifts. And I think that's a direct result of the culture we're seeing, and the shift I think that's needed to happen. When you look at what was the case over the last few years.
Yeah, man, Gus and those guys have certainly, earned their ice time, and we're seeing them more and more in some high leverage situations. I'll give Arneal some credit for that, about realizing the guys that were going and trying to get them out in some spots that normally we wouldn't have seen the fourth line. Last one for you. Elliot Friedman on the pod today was discussing trade market around the league, and I'll give a shout out to our pal Avco Cup, who transcribed this. Here's just a little bit. You can check out Avco on Twitter as well. He's got some great takes. Winnipeg has a lot of D. This is Friedman, by the way. And I think there's been some talk of, do they clear up the logjam? Yeah, we've been talking about that for 6 months, to be honest. Do they make some moves to sort of free it up a bit? And, basically, I just think they've told, because I think teams have called them. Teams are short on D, I think, have called Winnipeg and said, what are you doing? I think what they've told people is they're not going to do anything just for the sake of doing it. They understand that I think there's interest, and maybe some guys would like to play more, but they are determined to do what they think is best for themselves. That goes without saying, but what is best for themselves? It is continuing this logjam, keeping competition at the bottom of the lineup and having insurance when inevitably guys get hurt, or is it moving on from one of the defense, potentially a veteran, potentially a prospect, and get a little bit more help for a forward group that I think still could stand to be beefed up?
Yeah, and I mean, so here's the thing. I think the Jets are trying. I think they tried to make trades. I think I think it's a tough situation for Winnipeg, for GM Kevin Cheveldayoff to convince other, players to come here if there's no movement clause. And the other thing too is, I don't think he likes losing trades. And what I mean by that is, I don't think he's willing to, risk something that might be perceived as a loss right away. And we saw the Jets last couple seasons. I mean, apathy started to sink in. They couldn't get things wrong. There was a lot of pressure in that. And so, but I also think that their philosophy with their defense, look at Logan Stanley. He's injured right now. So Dylan Samberg's going to play. Obviously, a lot of people want Ville Heinola. I find myself in that camp from time to time, wanting to see, bring his skill set into that defense. But we also saw the hiccups over his time. And I think the Jets look at him as still very much a work in progress to get him that confidence. I mean, he's still a very young guy, right? So as much as they are log jammed there, I think that I think to your second point, they could probably use a bit more help up front, but I don't know, can they beef up their top six? Do they need to beef up their bottom six? Those are two. First of all, those are the answers are yes, and the answer is no. But it's easier if it was the other way around. It's easier to beef up the bottom six than it is to find someone who can play in the top six. And obviously, Nikolai Ehlers being out is a tough score here. I just don't know what the value is. I mean, who are you going to get rid of? Are you going to get rid of one of the veterans? Or are you going to get rid of one? You're probably not going to get rid of one of the younger guys. So, what's the market for say a guy like Brendan Dillon, who, there were rumors over the offseason that he was willing to maybe, be traded. What do you get for Nate Schmidt? Do you want to get rid of Nate Schmidt? He's the guy who laughs and jokes with everybody, and has arguably made this this Winnipeg Jets team a more likable club. Do you want to get rid of Dylan DeMello? And what's the market like for him? And do you want to give up what we've seen between him and Josh Morrissey, which at times has been good? I think the Winnipeg Jets, because they're because their systems are built around being strong defensively, I don't know if Rick Bowness, as much as we have heard and seen in his willingness to bring in young players and to give them opportunities, I think with what he's dealing with in a 2-year term with Winnipeg, he's gonna lean veteran. So when you lean veteran and you don't want to get rid of your young guys, you create a logjam. And unless Rick Bowness comes into Kevin Cheveldayoff's office and says Ville Heinola isn't part of the future, or I don't want to see this guy play, or this one doesn't fit, then I don't think you're going to get a lot of trades. Because I don't think for trades to happen, I think opportunity needs to come knocking. And I don't know that the Jets want to, in a year where they want to get back into the playoffs, where they want to implement new systems, are ready to hand the keys to younger guys. And I think for at least the season are going to lean on it. So I think it's going to be for those people who want to see a couple trades made on defense. My prediction is you're not going to see it. That you're going to see what we're witnessing now with guys coming in and out as Rick Bowness tries to get this team to buy into the systems that he thinks will make them successful.
Hammer, great stuff. Enjoy the rest of your time in Sim City. We'll look forward to seeing you back at the rink later on this week when the Jets are back at it against the Montreal Canadiens. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Huss, and shout out to the commenters and viewers. You guys make the show. So I'll try. I'll do my best to enjoy myself out here. You do your best to enjoy yourself over there. I know it was some pretty nice weather over the weekend. Bombers got a big bye week this week. You know, lots going on in Winnipeg. So should be an exciting couple of weeks coming up here.
Yeah. You know what? I'll text you later on because I actually did want to get Bombing's coming up. We're going to talk some CFL, but if you got some time before the end of the week, we might need to revisit the CFL playoffs because I would like to talk to you about that in the latest on the Jets. Thanks for doing this, dude. Check out all of his work following the team on the road, Winnipeg Free Press, and at Jeff K. Hamilton on Twitter. Speaking of those Bombers, we'll be firing it up with Darrin Bauming of Bonfire Sports in just a second. Princess Auto, great sponsors of the Blue and Gold and WST. And we've got one more time to rock the Princess Tailgate Zone before the game, and that is November 13th for the West Final. Tickets going fast right now. Make sure you count yourself in for the game. Get there early. Enjoy $5 beers, $3.50 poppin' hot dogs, hot chocolate, some warming areas as well. It really is the place to be. And that game will be the place to be in a couple weeks as the Bombers look to continue their quest for a third consecutive Grey Cup. Princess Auto, of course, is the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the project on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Culligan Water have been the experts in the water game around Winnipeg and southern Manitoba for over 65 years. Family owned and helping Manitobans with everything related to water and water products. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Check out the Culligan family and everything they can do for you online at drinkculligan.com. You can give them a call at 204-694-5180 or pop down and see them at 1200 Sargent Avenue and tell them your boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. Canadian Club, speaking of the game, I know there'll be a few more CC and Gingers enjoyed at the game on November 13th, but you don't have to wait until November 13th to get it at the Bomber game, along with the Beam Suntory family of spirits, Jim Beam, Brugal Rum. You can pop by your local beer store right now and pick up CC and Ginger available in 6-packs. And for you whiskey connoisseurs, don't forget, later on this week, the Spirits of Distinction Awards for Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries will be the release of the final installment in the Canadian Club Chronicles series. 45-year-old Canadian Club will release only 80 bottles in the province of Manitoba. And hey, Monday night or tonight, Bengals and the Browns. BP is the place to be for NFL. Of course, we gave away one of the grand prizes trips already to Bernard Putski. He's going to Vegas coming up in a couple weeks. But when you go there tonight or for any NFL game, you'll be able to chow down on pizza flights, get your ice cold bud for only $5 and enter or win a second grand prize for an NFL NHL weekend in Vegas for New Year's Eve. And right now, got some wings last night and tried the new craveable jalapeno popper dip with the guys for last night's game. It was awesome. You like a little spice in it, certainly have it. And by the way, you can also try the spicy buffalo mac and cheese right now and the creamy carbonara pizza. Watch the NFL and the Jets and enter to win at your local Boston Pizza, Winnipeg, Selkirk, Morden, Steinbach, and Portage La Prairie as well. All right, Bombers finished up this season pretty much looking like the team they were all year. That's the best team in the Canadian Football League. Let's bring in Darrin Bauming of Bonfire Sports for the latest on the team as they go into a playoff bye, waiting to see whether Calgary or BC will be the visitors on the 13th. DB, what's up? How was the weekend?
Haas, weekend was good, man. Not really meaningful CFL games, but still lots of intrigue going into the postseason, especially here in Winnipeg, where they're down again this week with a bye. But man, I that West Final, I'm with all the Blue Bombers fans out there. November 13th is going to be an absolute epic event.
It was, and Friday was awesome too. I really didn't know what to expect from the Bombers in that game. With nothing to play for, wanting to make sure you get out healthy. How much would we see of Zach Collaros? It turned out not to be much. I mean, Zach, 4 of 5 with 2 touchdowns. Take a seat. We'll see on the 13th. But a workmanlike performance. Many of the starters were in. And then when you're up the way they were, you can have a little fun later on. Mike Miller getting a touchdown, Willie J lining up at wideout. Overall, it seemed like they hit a bunch of milestones, have a little bit of fun, escaped unscathed, and they certainly look like they're ready for whoever comes to Winnipeg in a couple of weeks.
No question. They're firing on all cylinders right now. And even with the number 2s and guys at different positions and that sort of thing, like we saw in that regular season finale at IG Field against BC, is that they're still out there to win. And, everyone's talking about the health of these guys, who's going to be available, how healthy, how close to 100% a lot of them are going to be. There's only one way to stay healthy in professional football, Huss, and that is to play 100% the same way you would any other game. And I thought the Blue Bombers from top to bottom did that. You're right. Zach Collaros, 2 possessions, 2 touchdowns, 80%. And, nice to see him with a nice strike to Drew Wolodarski in his first game back, get those good feelings, that gel and chemistry going again. Same with Greg Ellingson. And then, of course, the 2 very tried and true receivers. With Nick Dembski out of the lineup, there was Rashid Bailey with a touchdown grab, so trademark of him a couple times this year, scooping it up off the turf. And, of course, Dalton Schoen adding to his league lead. What a season for him as a first-year CFLer. No doubt he will win CFL Most Outstanding Rookie this season. And then the defense, I thought, did a lot of good things. You're facing Nathan Rourke in his first game since August, 10 weeks on the injured list, dealing with that Lisfranc sprain in his foot. And twice he tried to go deep. First time it was Jamal Parker stepping in and knocking that ball down. Then it was Tyrell Ford, the Canadian rookie, stepping in and knocking that down. It really stopped Rourke from gaining, in his words, what he wanted to accomplish in this tune-up game, if you will, and that was gain confidence. Well, the 2 times he took shots downfield, Winnipeg's defenders and rookie defenders made big plays. All of that, I think, really lends itself to good feelings going into a bye week where it's preparation and all eyes will be glued to the screen Sunday. Any given Sunday, you never know what's going to happen. But the Stampeders in Vancouver to give the Lions a serious run for their money.
What did you, the biggest question going into the game obviously had nothing to do with the Bombers. It was Nathan Rourke. Right. What did you think of Rourke DB, and how much like the first half of the season Nathan Rourke do you think we'll see in the big game coming up on the weekend against the Stamps?
That's the $1 million question, right? Rourke took the league by storm as a first-year starter and second-year player in 2022. He clearly learned a lot under Michael Riley, veteran quarterback of the CFL, and Rourke served as his number 2 in BC last year because he prepares like nobody I've ever heard about. Having conversations prior to that game, talking to some of my friends, Nick Kowalski, good friend of ours, Hustler, and, Matt Baker and Julio Caravata and all these people with the BC Lions who are in and around the team. They say he prepares and practices like nobody they have seen before, working on technique and mechanics and fundamentals and all these things. And then the film prep as well. That is there, no doubt. But the question is, how is his foot and how is his mobility? The arm looks fine. He is, doing all that fundamental work. I'm sure he's going to be able to throw the football like he always has. But what made Nathan Rourke so electric and dangerous in his impressive start to the season prior to that injury was his ability to break plays, get out of the pocket, run with his legs, make a lot of things happen. He had 2 or 3 50-yard touchdowns. He was absolutely killing defenses with his arm, with his legs, and I think it all came together with smarts and preparation like few others in pro football today. Will that be there? We didn't see too much of it in this regular season finale in Winnipeg last week, but always, teams are never going to show everything in the regular season, especially when they've got an important playoff game, 7 days out. So for Nathan Rourke, I'm not going to know, or none of us are going to know or even feel confident in what he is able to do until he steps on the field this coming Sunday, and he does it. But, all the pieces are there, Hustler. Are we going to see it, or is he still a little bit under 100% from the waist down?
Yeah, I mean, I hope he's as close to 100%. I mean, I'd love to see. I'd love to BC win this game, and I'd love to see BC come in here in the cold on the 13th and have what were certainly the two best teams early on in the season go at it with an opportunity to get to the upcoming Grey Cup. As far as the Bombers go, I mean, and I imagine this will be a little different than a normal bye week DB. I mean, I think the guys will be in the facility probably daily. They might take a little bit of less time practice wise, but Mike O'Shea will be working. But of course, so much of what they'll be working on is probably dependent on what happens in that game coming up next Sunday. But this won't be take the week off and go back home and hang out. This entire club, frankly, they've sort of seemed like they've been in playoff mode for a couple of weeks already. And that's going to continue even without a game on the schedule.
No doubt. Even going back to those early playoff times with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, with Matt Nichols at quarterback, when they had West semifinal meetings with teams, Mike O'Shea's message to the club was, look, guys, we got a month ahead of us here where you are going to be able to accomplish something you will never forget for the rest of your life. So do what you need to do on your days off. And then when you come to work, it is focusing on the goal and the task at hand. For the Blue Bombers, it is preparing this week to make sure their minds and their bodies are where they need to be. Then next week, when they know if it's either the Lions or the Calgary Stampeders coming to IG Field on November 13th for the West Final, preparing for that opposing quarterback, for that opposing defense, for that team's opposing special teams and the wrinkles and the unique talent that each of those clubs have. But you mentioned this week that it's not about hanging out and doing much. The Bombers are on the field. They are practicing. No media availability this week as they don't have to, it being a bye week, but they are working. And I think coming into this weekend, Hustler, and going into next, I think we're going to get a really good picture of who is going to be available for the playoffs, who is not. Of course, Mike O'Shea will keep his lips as sealed as he can going into these competitive games. You don't want to tilt your hat when these games matter more than they ever have.
Darrin, it was, it was relatively gorgeous for late October for that game on Friday night. And we're still enjoying just beautiful weather today and really through the next few days as well. Although I do have a weather prediction. We're going to have this gorgeous week of weather. It'll get a little bit colder at the start of next week. And we'll get our first big dump, maybe Friday the 11th, maybe the 12th. But a bunch of snow for that West Final. And I would imagine that Mike O'Shea and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers would be quite fine if weather became a factor in that final game.
One of my favorite things, a sneak peek inside the Blue Bombers locker room over the last couple of years was a photo somebody took of the whiteboard that is kind of right by the doors to, enter the field from the Blue Bombers locker room. It was cold, it was windy, it was snow everywhere. And it said kickoff time, say 7 o'clock, opponents, say Calgary Stampeders, weather, perfect. They prepare the same way no matter what. And if it is freezing cold with 2 feet of snow, or if it is balmy and clear and no wind, the Blue Bombers are going to enter that game loving the conditions and everything that is involved. That does raise the question about this West semifinal being in a dome. The CFL's only covered field cross country, and that is BC Place, where the West Final will be. So the Calgary Stampeders are a very run heavy team. They've got Dedrick Mills, Peyton Logan, then, and of course, the best running back in the CFL today in Kadeem Carey, and then Jake Mayer, who's just an efficient, smart quarterback to kind of run it all and bring in the pass game that Calgary has always been known for. They go into BC, and in a controlled stadium, in a controlled weather environment, how will the winner of that game then adjust to, as you mentioned, what could be some severe Southern Manitoba weather conditions for that West Final? To me, that game being in a dome this weekend versus being at McMahon in Calgary, where the wind could blow, you might have rain or maybe even snow coming off the Rocky Mountains, that adjustment from a dome to southern Manitoba in just 1 week time, and suddenly it's mid-November. I think that might work to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers' advantage, getting an opponent that maybe hasn't been playing outdoors as much as Winnipeg has.
Well, we saw a bunch of the BC guys wearing jackets on Friday, and the Bombers were out there as if it was in the middle of summer, maybe appreciating
Right.
just how nice it was for the time of year. I do think, and again, putting the Bomber fan hat on for a minute, I think I'd rather have BC come in. First of all, I'd love to see Nathan Rourke in a game like that, but I really do
Sure.
think that the home field advantage will be more significant for the Bombers if they're playing against BC outdoors after playing the week before in the Dome. Maybe that if the Calgary Stampeders, who were probably used to it a little bit more. Before we go, what's your early leans? I won't hold this to you for picks, but who do you think graduates from this weekend's matchup, Hamilton, Montreal, and BC and Calgary, to live to see another day?
Yeah, I mentioned this on Bonfire Sports. Josh Frey-Sam of the Winnipeg Free Press joined me on game day after dark following the Bombers game. We had a great conversation. We talked about kind of our predictions, our CFL playoff bracket, if you will. I had Toronto coming out of the East, but I'm kind of reconsidering. I think Hamilton is going to win on the road in Montreal and then win on the road in Toronto and represent the East in the 109th Grey Cup. I do. I think Hamilton has all the pieces there, and I think they're just, a scrappy and mentally sharp team with head coach Orlando Steinhauer. So, maybe Dane Evans has finally shaken off the fourth quarter yips and his egregious turnovers that gave him a lot of losses this year. In the West, I fully expect Calgary to go into BC, even with a healthy and effective Nathan Rourke. Their defense, their special teams, and their ability to just control possession with the run game on offense. I think they're going to be here in Winnipeg on November 13th. You never know who's going to win these games, but here's the thing, Hustler. If the Blue Bombers do anything this year but win the Grey Cup, it is going to be an absolute catastrophic letdown of huge proportions. So I expect Winnipeg to win that West Final. Hamilton, Winnipeg for a third straight year, reminiscent of the 50s and 60s when they met so many times as well. But that's who I got going into the 109th Grey Cup. I'll wait until we're in Saskatchewan territory before I give you my Grey Cup prediction. But,
well, listen,
there is one team.
I love the prediction in the East.
Yeah.
And that would be a wild scenario for the Ticats to get there again after not blowing the team up, looking like they should have been blown up for the majority of this season, and then sort of getting it together at the end. And it's all about where in week 2, week 5, it doesn't mean a damn thing now. It's how you're playing right now. And I'm here for the prediction. I'm here for it. I'm looking forward to that game. Darrin, what's up on Bonfire this week with the off week? Obviously, there won't be a game day show, but I know you'll be all over everything happening in the CFL and more.
Yeah. Lots happening, obviously. Zach Schnitzer will join me for Bonfire midweek, as we always do, Wednesday night, 7:30 live on our YouTube channel. This weekend, I got a unique opportunity. I'm actually flying to Vancouver for the West semifinal. I'm going to be producing some on-camera content for CFL.ca with Christina Constable and their awesome team out there. I'll be able to take in walk through with the Stampeders, practice with the BC Lions, get a good look at Nathan Rourke this weekend. And then, of course, ahead of the West Final, we're going to be firing on full cylinders the rest of the way. Bonfire Sports will be at the Grey Cup no matter what this season. So, for everybody out there that wants in-depth Blue Bombers coverage and the entire CFL, we got you on Bonfire.
That is awesome. We'll have a great trip out west, DB. We'll have to lean on you in and around the game for a little boots on the ground perspective on what should be a hell of a football game between Calgary and BC. And we'll see the winner here on the 13th of November. We'll see if my weather prediction comes true before then. Travel safe and enjoy it out there, pal.
Absolutely. I got you, Huss. You call. I'll be ready.
Good stuff. There's Darrin Bauming. Make sure you're following him on Twitter and Bonfire Sports. And if you're watching us on YouTube, head on over to the Bonfire page. Make sure you give him a sub and check out all of Darrin's great work, along with Zach and the rest of his team covering the Canadian Football League. All right. Hey, my guy Nick, our DQ Nick, was out at the game last night. Sounded like there were quite a few Jet fans there. I'm really regretful not being out there. The Vegas trip is so much fun. It just sucked with the 2 games so early. And My partner here kind of busy right around this time, so didn't make it out. Nick did, though, had a great time. But don't worry, even with Nick down in Sin City, along with tons of Jet fans, Nick and Nikki DQs are still ready and waiting for you. And got to tell you, we got a little bit of extra mint blizzard weather over, and the good kind of blizzards, not the one that we'll be expecting in time for the football game in a couple weeks. Of course, all the delicious blizzard flavors are waiting for you. The amazing DQ stack burgers, my personal favorite, the honey barbecue chicken fingers. If you haven't tried them, do it. You can thank me later. And of course, all the great take-home ice cream treats. And if you are needing a DQ ice cream cake for an upcoming party or event, hit them up on Instagram if you'd like a DQ Manitoba. They'll get it custom made for you however you want for a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ on St. Anne's Road. And great weekend. We had some late night games. We had a ton of football on Saturday and Sunday, and probably quite a few 1919s in the empty bin after the weekend. If you are thirsty for Winnipeg's best local beer, just in time for the Monday Nighter, you know where to go. Pick it up at the Brewery and Tap Room on William Avenue. You can grab 1919, the Good Times Variety Pack, and more Little Brown Jug favorites at your local beer store. But if you don't even want to leave the house, they'll also deliver it to you quick and easy online. Order for citywide delivery online at littlebrownjug.ca. And when you're heading out, if you're grabbing a beer on tap somewhere, make sure you see if they have 1919. You can find it at fine bars and restaurants throughout the city of Winnipeg. All right, we got to get to CoolBet lines. We've also got some great Halloween pumpkins from some Jet fans that did a great work. But let's get Remis back in here first to get the show back going before he takes a few days. We spent so much time talking about the Jets off the top and the week and the crazy game last night and Connor Hellebuck's brilliant performance. We didn't get too much into the Bombers, Reem, but as we just mentioned with Darrin, really impressive Friday night performance for a team that really didn't have a lot to play for. And I think you just find the winner's mentality that Mike O'Shea has instilled in everybody in that locker room.
Yeah, incredible way for the Bombers to end the season. Zach Collaros getting those 2 touchdown passes. I may have started Nathan Rourke in fantasy. I don't think that was the best plan. Getting his feet wet and trying to ready himself for next week's playoff game. Shout out to the Bombers, though, who did bring it. Dalton Schoen, I mean, again and again. What more can we say about this guy? In his rookie season, has led all receivers in yards and touchdowns. Zach Collaros leading the league in touchdowns, second in yards. I mean, I'm looking at the top receiver touchdowns. Dembski and Bailey both in the top 5 there, along with Schoen. The Bombers, workmanlike attitude, brought it again Friday to a home crowd. Very odd week in the CFL with the playoff matchups already decided. Didn't matter the Bombers. Oh yeah, Brady Oliveira there were concerns about him early on in the season. 3rd leading rusher in the league, over 1,000 yards.
Got the 1K on Friday night, and he had that big run of about, I think he was down. He needed 19 yards, and he busted out about a 23 or 24 yarder. And I'm pretty sure he knew what he needed to get it. But he didn't do a big personal celebration. He got up, but there was a little bit of I think, accomplishment in what he'd done. And absolutely, hey, what were we talking about on this show 3 and 4 weeks into the season? It was the Bombers' struggling running game, and then seeing what our old pal Andrew Harris was doing in Toronto, and thought that maybe there'd be a reunion later on. Well, really, since that moment, Oliveira has stepped up, become a more confident rusher, taken advantage of the incredible offensive line in front of him. And I mean, what a great season for Brady to get to the 1,000-yard mark and in the top 3 in CFL rushing. And, Remo, once again, just as far as we spoke about the Bombers, getting the guys that we don't talk a lot about back. I mean, Stanley Bryant back in, Jackson Jeffcoat back in. As long as all those players are as healthy as possible, and it really does seem like they will be, this team has a hell of a good chance to get it done, regardless of whether it's Calgary or BC here on Sunday, November 13th, and get back to Regina for a chance to do something that we haven't seen done since the early 80s, and that's win 3 consecutive Grey Cups.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that we're on our way to seeing a possibility of back-to-back-to-back. You'll have to get through the winner of BC Calgary. We're going to go through the lines. I'm not sure if it's out for that game, but I think it's going to be pretty good. I think a lot depends on Nathan Rourke, how healthy he is, because if he's on his game, he's the best in the league. Now, I don't think he's going to win MOP Huss for playing 10 games. This year was an amazing 10 games, but that's not, you got to play more than half a season if you want to be the MOP. But I want to lean BC, but I think Calgary's pretty good, and they've got this crazy run attack with Kadeem Carey and Peyton Logan, whoever else is in there, and got some nice receivers as well. So Jake Mayer, he's going to be the guy in his first playoff game. Nathan Rourke as well. I guess that would be his first too. So a nice QB matchup there on Sunday. That's the main event at 3:30 on Sunday.
Certainly
No
is.
offense
All right,
to
we're going to get to
Montreal.
We'll just quickly touch on the NFL and get to the CoolBet lines in a minute. But before we do that, it is Halloween. I know we didn't dress up today. I had a very, very busy weekend. There was too much sports to think ahead to realize that today was Halloween and that I should have got a costume. So anyways, apologies to everyone. However, I did spend time over the weekend checking out some incredible Halloween decorations. And a couple Jet fans put together some incredible pumpkins. We've got to show them right now. If you're listening on the podcast, come back and check out this point in the show if you'd like to see them. This first one, we just raised the statue of Dale Hawerchuk in downtown Winnipeg, and our pal Mike Krajewski with an incredible Dale Hawerchuk pumpkin. I'm amazed at how people do these, Remo, like how perfect that they look. I mean, that really is art. Listen, Halloween's fun for the parties, the costumes and all that. Pumpkin art, though, is something that can be really, really cool as well. And this one of the late, great Dale Hawerchuk by our pal Mike Krajewski was phenomenal.
Yeah, I don't even know how you do that, but I like the detail. You can tell the helmet. It's the face, the lighting behind it. That's pretty awesome. I don't think I could ever do that. It's just a damn shame. Pumpkins don't last forever. You can't put it in like a box and hang it on your wall. I mean, after at least a week, it's gonna get all weird looking. So that's awesome. At least you can take a picture and share it here.
Safe to say that I do not have that club in my bag, but Michael Krajewski's Dale Hawerchuk pumpkin was incredible. And then I caught these as well from Glenn Ryland, who I know Glenn is often popping into the chat. This is the one I want, and this is the man. This is the backbone of the franchise. One Connor Hellebuck wearing the aviator jersey with the 37 and even getting the true on the goal stick. This was apparently Glenn's first run at these, and needless to say, Hellebuck's my fave, as with most Jets fans, especially right now, even if he wasn't already. And that might be the quintessential piece of Halloween decoration for Jets Nation, considering that he is the guy that's making it happen right now for the club.
Yeah, some really nice detail there with the equipment. The 37 is in the Jets number font. Really nice pumpkin here. I did enjoy the feature last night with Jesse Pollock getting the full tour of the mask from Hellebuck, so I can see some of those mask details. And on this, yeah, I didn't realize all of the little stuff inside that he's got. So that's a guy who knows what he wants from a mask and from his equipment. You can definitely see it on this pumpkin. Really, really nice job there too.
You know it. So Glenn had that one, and then he said, well, this one went so well, we did number 2. And this one, a stone-faced Mark Scheifele pumpkin in the Heritage jersey. You can get the full look on the face and everything. I'm just blown away at how much detail you can get into these pumpkins if people know what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you like? Print out a picture and project it onto the pumpkin and draw around it or something? I don't know, but it looks pretty good. He's got the Heritagers. You can see the shoulder patch on there. Yeah, stone face. He's staring you down after scoring a beauty goal, and he's definitely scored a lot of those this year.
Yeah, and just if you missed that, feature with Hellebuck yesterday with Jesse Pollock going through the his mask. Check it out. I mean, I would imagine the TSN would have it, or maybe Bar Down would have it on one of their social channels. But Hellebuck, such a beauty and such an interesting guy to hear talk about things other than the game that just happened. Very entertaining for you Jets and Hellebuck fans. And shout out to Jesse for always doing a great bit of work following and repping our city and the team out there out east. All right, let's get to the CoolBet lines for tonight. New episode of The Lock Shop is out. Dusty and I did it along with Jake Bolin Moss from CoolBet just before the show today. So search The Lock Shop wherever you get your podcasts and get that in. I had an unbelievable Sunday. The two parlays they gave out on Saturday, plus 549 and plus 622, both cashed. One thanks to that ridiculous ending. Well, the game that almost never ended between Carolina and Atlanta. And I would have had a clean sweep 4-0 for the best bets if the Bills didn't allow that late backdoor cover by the Packers on that late meaningless touchdown. That being said, can't complain too much. Was a great day. As far as tonight's game goes, we do have the Bengals and the Browns. This game has not moved off 3 all week long. It was as high as minus 125 for 3 earlier. It's now minus 3, minus 120. You're getting more than even money on the Browns if you're taking them plus 3. But you're not going to see a hook tonight, I don't think, and it'll just change what the cost is on the 3 either way. I kind of like Cincinnati. I think they're rolling, but no Jamar Chase could make this one even more interesting. But the one thing I will tell you, if you're going to CoolBet, my favorite bet for these primetime games is the over 3.5 field goals plus 125. It's been cashing almost every primetime game. Why not keep it going tonight? So that's what we've got in total, by the way, 45 in this game. And then 3 games in the NHL tonight. Detroit at Buffalo. Eric Comrie starting for the Sabres, minus 152. Capitals at Hurricanes. Capitals plus 168. Canes minus 200 at home. And the Kings and Blues, 2 teams that both lost to the Jets last week, although they did it in a very, very different fashion. The Blues got worked for a full 60 minutes by Winnipeg, and the Kings sort of did that to the Jets. However, Jonathan Quick couldn't make a save. All that being said, they're going head-to-head tonight. Blues have lost 4 straight. They're minus 122 at home, and the LA Kings are plus 104. What'd you like and what'd you hate in the NFL yesterday, Reem?
Oh, man. Definitely like seeing Tony Pollard go off for major yardage with Dallas.
He's better than Zeke, period. We've known that for 2 years.
Jerry Jones still says they're going to live and die by Zeke. Zeke is their guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that. And clearly, Tony Pollard, when he gets the ball, he's pretty good.
It just goes to show you when you're an owner, never mind an owner / GM, and you make a decision and you pay a guy huge sums of money, and then you've got another guy making less than $1 million that's outperforming him. It's very, very difficult to make that change because it almost makes you look like you made a mistake in signing the guy to the big deal right now. But there's no mistake when you watch the Cowboys play. And ask any Cowboy fan, I guarantee you they've got more confidence in Tony Pollard carrying the ball right now than they do Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, the Minnesota Vikings, and we got a lot of Vikings fans here. They keep winning us. Could they have that number 2 seed in the NFC locked up? Win over the Cardinals at home. But that 1 seed in the NFC, they keep rolling. They haven't really been tested at all, still undefeated. Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown, 3 touchdowns yesterday. PED test today. He got tapped on the shoulder to go.
That's an honor to be tested after a game. It means you blew up.
It means you had a good game. The nightmare season for the Rams continues. Can't seem to get going. 31-14 with Christian McCaffrey throwing a touchdown pass for the 49ers.
So awesome. McCaffrey was incredible in that game. I could not believe how good he looked as a member of the Niners. He didn't get much going on against the Kansas City the week before it. To be honest, on both sides of the football, the Niners weren't really in that one against the Chiefs, but they're getting a few more guys back. The defense stepped up big time, and they just absolutely waxed the Rams in that second half of that game. And once again, Kyle Shanahan owns Sean McVay in the regular season. And to be honest, just makes that upset win in the NFC Championship game look more and more like a fluke as this season goes on.
Here,
biggest
one
no-show of the week.
Yeah, you go.
Biggest no-show of the week was the Raiders. I mean, they basically barely got their asses off Bourbon Street to show up at the Superdome and get shut out by Andy Dalton and the Saints.
Yeah, West Coast team going east. Isn't that a time zone thing that you always talk about when betting? I see Alvin Kamara get on the board with 3 touchdowns. Speaking of West Coast teams, has the Seattle Seahawks. I think that's one of the stories of the season. They're now 5-3, beating the Giants, who are somehow 6-2. But we saw, everything with Russ, Geno Smith. I mean, out of nowhere this season, and the quote from Tyler Lockett after the game, getting some traction on social media, saying it's amazing what we can accomplish when no one cares who gets the credit. And everyone's like saying, hey, did he take a shot at Russ? Did he take a shot at Russ? And then Lockett
yes, he did.
On Twitter. He's saying people need to stop reaching. I've said this 5 to 10 times since I've been in the league. Stop looking for a story and let us enjoy our team. But they've taken so many shots in the media at Russ. So it's hard not to think that this is a subtle shot at Russ. And amazing how well they're doing with Geno Smith at quarterback. What a trade.
Geno's going to the Pro Bowl, folks. I'm telling you right now, Geno Smith is going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback. I can't wait to bet the Seahawks in Arizona next week. They're 2-point underdogs right now. It just has been a great. And speaking of overlooked quarterbacks, my guy, Taylor Heineke, left hand up for the Commanders fans, got it done. Down 9 late. They get a field goal, get the ball back, late touchdown, and Washington wins again. Indy with another loss. Frank Reich probably on the hot seat right about now. And yes, as we mentioned, the Green Bay Packers put lipstick on a pig with a late touchdown to make it look not bad, only losing by 10 at Buffalo, but never really in that game. Yesterday, Patriots get a big win over the New York Jets in the division. You mentioned the Vikings winning by 8 over Arizona. Philly pounding Pittsburgh, and Derrick Henry, the beast, back again. If you ever see that Derrick Henry is playing against the Houston Texans, hit every single over prop there possibly is involving the rushing game for the Tennessee Titans, and take it. Enjoy the game tonight, gang. We got Cincinnati and Cleveland. I'm looking forward to that one. 3 games tonight in the National Hockey League. And then tomorrow, of course, the Jets are going to be back at practice. We'll have the latest on the club and look ahead to around the rest of the National Hockey League. And we'll be doing it solo or, well, with a bunch of guests. And, of course, Jeremy behind the scenes, who's done a great job today all along. Remo, I guess that's it for a few days for you. So wishing you and the family well, and we'll try and keep this thing rolling in your absence for a little while.
Yeah, thank you very much. And shout out to Jeremy, who'll be filling in for me. Won't be here for the next couple days, but I'll still be following the team, and we'll hopefully have a nice homestand, and looking forward to the CFL playoffs as well. Try to pop in, but yeah, I won't be here the rest of the week, and maybe I'll pop in and out. We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But anyways, first things first, all the best to you and Evan and, of course, Leah, and we'll look forward to some good news later on this week. That's going to do it for us, because, as we mentioned, Jeremy's doing a great job working with us for the next couple weeks, and we're going to need to get the podcast up for everyone wanting to listen to it on the way home. But coming up tomorrow on the program, we'll talk more Jets. We'll have an extended conversation with our pal Mike McIntyre. And a little bit later on in the week, Murata Tesh, Brandon Rowicki, Ken Weeb, Scott Billick. Dusty's going to join us off the top of one of the programs as well. Oh, and Mo Khan popping in from Montreal, working on that, a return visit from Mo. So you know where to be, folks. We'll hold it down for Remo for the next little while. Remo, all the best to you. Folks, thanks for being with us. Awesome show today. Lots to get to from the weekend, and we will continue the Jets talk, Bombers talk, NFL, CFL, World Series, by the way, might be rained out tonight. Hoping it gets going. That's 1-1 coming out of the weekend. We'll hit that as well. Coming up on the next edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast as well. Thumbs up on the way out for you YouTubers, folks, and we'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. right here on WST.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down.
Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.